Welcome to Saturday Night at the Movies, the podcast that celebrates classic, cult, and current films and television shows and the people that made them, and many other aspects of pop culture. I'm your host, Steve Rubin. Our producer is Ben Shrewsbury, and our signature theme was composed by Greg Lehrhoff. Here it's always Saturday night, and our mission is to chronicle film, television, and pop cultural history one memory at a time. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a huge fan of the HBO Max series, The Gilded Age. This is such a lush and awe-inspiring show with a level of production design that truly puts the L in lush and the A in awe. So tonight I'm delighted to invite the Gilded Age's production designer, Bob Shaw, a three-time Emmy-winning and Oscar-nominated designer, to come on the show and tell us a little about how he approached the enormous task of recreating New York City of the 1880s. Welcome, Bob.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. As I mentioned pre-interview, I just finished watching the third season, and sometimes I just sit there with my wife, and we're stunned at what you guys have done on this show. I mean, I don't know where to begin, but before we get into like the process of creating this world, I'd like to know a little bit more of you. Now, when I was a little kid, I played with Lincoln Logs and erector sets, and I built little things. It was long before Legos. What was your childhood like? Were you a builder? I mean, was there something going on that led you to think that maybe you could be a designer early on?
Well, I also would make these constructs using every building tool that I had, combining the erector set with the Lego set with the with the there was a Disney's World of Tomorrow building set and regular blocks, and I would always build these big constructions. But actually, when I was in high school, I was equally interested in music and art, and I was sort of torn between the two. And somehow or other, because I became an opera fan. Because I played the French horn and they give you all these orchestral excerpts to play, largely from Wagner and whatnot. I came up with this idea that I would, if I designed scenery for operas and musicals and that sort of thing, that I would combine my interest in art and music. So somehow or other, I decided I wanted to design scenery when I was 16, and I've done it ever since. So I'm either very focused or in a terrible rut.
Well, I give you credit for making a calculated decision at the age of 16. I could actually say that at the age of 16, I barely functioned. I ate a lot of sugar and I read a lot of comic books and I got into the James Bond movies, as I mentioned. But that's great. So did you get your degree in some kind of design?
Well, I had done my research and I thought that I would need to go to art school as an undergraduate. And I'd read that everybody who does what I do, or almost everybody, has gone and gotten a graduate degree from Yale or NYU or back in those days, Carnegie Mellon. So I went to art school, not realizing that it didn't necessarily have a lot to do with being a designer. And I met a director when I was an undergraduate, a director named Wilfred Leach. And he came to see a show that I designed at school that was directed by one of his students from Sarah Lawrence, and he said, "Hey, kids, you want to work on a show?" And I think it was because it was a lot of painted scenery, and I painted every square inch of it myself. So I ended up going with him and working on a show at the Public Theater that was a translation of Machiavelli's The Mandrake that was translated by Wallace Shawn, the actor and writer. And I was only 20, and I kept working with Wilfred. And then when I was 23, we did the Linda Ronstadt Pirates of Penzance, which moved to Broadway. And I thought, well, I seem to have gotten started, so maybe I can skip the grad school and the debt. So I got very, very lucky meeting this amazing director, Wilfred Leach.
What is your hometown?
I'm from Mountain Lakes, New Jersey.
Okay, so is that across the river from Manhattan?
Yeah, yeah. It's just not even an hour from Manhattan. Although, in those days, the 60s and 70s, people thought that, if you went into Manhattan, you had a 50-50 chance of coming out again. So my parents didn't really understand what it was I wanted to do. And when I went to Pratt, as an art school, it was with the understanding that I would do what they called commercial art, which of course is advertising. And I lasted half an hour in the introduction to advertising class before I went down and changed my major to drawing. And my parents didn't really know this. And they neither of them had been to college, so they didn't understand certain things about changing your major and declaring your major. So it was all just a lot of good luck in the beginning.
Are you a trained illustrator? You can actually create realistic art on your own. Is that something you do?
I can to a certain degree. I do more portraiture and pencil drawings and stuff. I mean, I recently came across some old sketchbooks in my attic, and I don't know why I stopped. I used to be one of those people who had a notebook with me wherever I went and was always drawing. And at some point I stopped. Maybe it was when I started working film hours because I did theater for 12 years before I realized I was, nominally successful but financially poor. So a good friend of mine named Howard Cummings, another production designer, was always knew he wanted to do film, and I called him up one day and said, "You have to hire me to work on a film." And because of my theater background, I'd always built scenery, and Howard had done more shows that were I call from the hunter-gatherer school, where it's a lot more location work. And so I worked on a film with him for the first time,
And you
something
meant,
called A Shock to the System, which is not a film very many people have heard of, with Michael Caine and Elizabeth McGovern and Peter Riegert.
oh, very good. I actually worked with Peter Rieger on my first produced credit too. Very nice man. We did an adaptation of the baseball play Bleacher Bums,
Uh-huh.
and Peter played one of the leads. We shot that in Toronto. I was working at Showtime at the time. Showtime said you can shoot anywhere where in the world as long as it's Toronto. And everything was shot in Toronto. Now, I looked in your filmography. I have worked on some tremendous shows before you got into the Gilded Age world. You worked on Sopranos. I mean, I take it you were the guy.
I was the second guy because I did not do the first season.
Okay.
And under the heading of be nice to everybody in this business or any business, the second film I worked on was something called Mortal Thoughts, which was with Demi Moore and Bruce Willis. And the assistant accountant was a woman named Eileen Landris, who later became the producer of The Sopranos. So then,
Oh,
when for whatever reason, they were looking for a new designer for the second season of The Sopranos, she brought me in. And I hadn't worked with her in a long time. I worked with her on quiz shows. But then she was the head accountant, and I got to know her again. But she kind of got me started by bringing me into The Sopranos, because The Sopranos has been the gift that keeps on giving.
right, right. And since you came in after the first season, that means you did not design Bada Bing.
I didn't design Bada Bing. I didn't design the Soprano house. I didn't design a lot of the early basic sets. No.
But what a show to be involved with. Just before he got the role, I was at Showtime. I was a publicist, and we were doing a remake of 12 Angry Men, and with George C. Scott and Hume Cronin and Jack Lemmon. And James Gandolfini played the part originally played by Edward Binns in the 1950, 57 version. And I brought the Today Show out to do filming, behind the scenes for a break. And James didn't want to be interviewed. He said, "What do you want to talk to me for? I'm a nobody." Little did he know.
He remained extremely humble.
Well, you go on to work on Mad Men and Boardwalk Empire. I mean, these are very iconic television series with visual strong. Were you number one or number two on Mad Men?
I did the pilot. I only did the pilot.
You did the pilot. Okay.
That's what I mean when I say that The Sopranos was the gift that kept on giving, because Matt Weiner wrote Mad Men, and that's how I got onto that project. And Terry Winter wrote, who was also from The Sopranos, wrote Boardwalk Empire and introduced me to Martin Scorsese, for which I will be eternally grateful. And even doing Nurse Jackie, excuse me, I did because I knew Edie Falco and the director Alan Coulter from The Sopranos. So, a lot of things came from The Sopranos for me.
So, what got you into the Gilded Age?
Well, because I had done Boardwalk Empire, uh, I was one of the few people who had done a backlot set on the East Coast. And when you do one and you see what it looks like after it survives one winter, or barely survives one winter, you understand why the industry moved west. But and so I sort of had gotten a little bit of a name for doing period things and for doing a big build like the boardwalk. So and I've always been a New York City history buff. So I knew a lot of the background that they were eventually going to be getting into on the Gilded Age. I mean, as a matter of fact, when I interviewed, I said, "Are you going to get into the opera wars?" And they said, "Oh, you know about those?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, we would like to get into that eventually if we go more than one season." So I think that might have even been one of the clinchers is that I knew some of the territory they were getting into.
Was Julian Fellows in all of these early meetings with you? Was that
No, honestly, I met someone who originally this show was going to be at NBC, and they were sort of saying they understood that they needed to go toe to toe with the cable, the premium cable, and they were really committed to doing this. And then we did a budget, and then they sort of said, "Let's put a pin in that." And while they were debating whether or not to go ahead with it or to do it in Budapest or whatever, Greenblatt went from uh, NBC to HBO, and so brought that project with him. And so that was, and then of course I had a long relationship with HBO, but I had originally been hired to do what was going to be the NBC version.
yeah, there was no way NBC could afford this show.
Well,
Uh,
I would say it's sort of like Dr. Evil. I'm going to ransom the world for $1 million. But the conception of what a lot of money was, can vary.
oh, sure. I threw up a piece of art for those of you who are watching on YouTube and on True TV Plus. Is the I take it this is your backlot property where you started to build your streets.
Yes.
And I have to say, and I'm sure you'll enlighten us as to what is effects and what is real. When you watch The Gilded Age and you're in downtown New York City, 1880s New York City, it is so dimensional. You completely believe that you're in the real city. Um, how do I put this? When you got the assignment, did you envision how big this would be in terms of your workload, or all along you knew basically what you wanted?
I did have an idea of how big the show was or how big the show ideally should be. And it's to HBO's credit that they sort of let us do it. I mean, while we were drawing things and planning things and budgeting things, I thought at some point someone was going to say, "Okay, let's pull back here, or let's not do this, or let's not do that." But they generally didn't. They knew what it was going to take to make it authentic, and we were able to do it, which is, I kept saying to everyone while we were working on it, "Enjoy this. You will probably never be able to do this again."
Now, I don't know if you're privileged to talk about how much each episode costs. Is that something you can talk about, or is it
Not something I know.
okay? You know,
Um,
these are the days when I hardly understand budgets on major shows and movies anymore because they seem to be somewhere in the high ionosphere. But it there's just such a great sense of the detail, and obviously having worked on Boardwalk, and you are very familiar with period detail, but it seems to be off the charts on this show. Every episode looks like a feature film in many ways. It really does. Doesn't look like television. Of course, HBO's been saying for years that it's not television, it's HBO.
well, I think this that started with The Sopranos, really, because at the time we were told that each episode sort of seemed like a film, and there were a lot of corners that you would normally cut on a TV show that weren't cut. I mean, normally there would always be a certain number of scenes in this set and a certain number of scenes in that set, and David Chase didn't, write that way. And sometimes when you would be presenting a plan for an episode, and he would say, "So he pulls right up in front of, and happens to be a parking spot like on the Rockford Files." And he was really wanting authenticity. And if it happened to work out that he wrote something for an established set, he did. But if it didn't suit what was happening with an episode, we would almost start from scratch.
Well, aside from Central Park, which has been there forever, there's not much of 1880s New York City left in current New York City, correct?
There's not, and it's strange because there's a fair amount of the 1890s, but less of the 1880s. And
So the Van Ryns and the Russells, the two major families in Gilded Age, live on a 61st Street. That's Upper East Side.
that's Upper East Side, and that's, playing a little bit fast and loose with history because history had they hadn't really extended that far uptown, at the time of our story. But it was an essential thing really to put one end of their block on the park because when you're looking at the Russell Mansion and you turn to the left, you're seeing real trees and a real wall and they don't have to do a visual effects extension in that direction. And because we built one block, but the Van Ryn house and the Russell house are pretty complete. The very top has to be added with visual effects, but the further you get away and you get toward the other intersection, the more incomplete the buildings are.
Now, I was trying to give myself a quick tutorial on some of your inspirations. I pulled up a picture. I think is this the called the Elms in
That's the Elms in Newport, and this first season we did a fair amount of filming in Newport, but we were representing parts of the Newport mansions as New York mansions. There was only one set, Mamie Fish house that was actually Newport as Newport because and it was funny you never know how a show is going to develop and we were you know saying we were in 1882 and the most of the large mansions in Newport had not been built yet. Most of them are from the 1890s and around the turn of the century. So I figured, well, it would be a wood frame house, and so that's why Mamie Fish has a house that's so different from everyone else because I didn't really know how things were going to develop. And then in season two, after Julian Fellows had spent some time in Newport, he was like, "Well, this is fantastic. I want to include this for real." But we're in Newport a little earlier than the heyday of Newport.
right, right. When they let's see, when they go to Mrs. Russell has to do the ball in the third season. At the end of the third season, they're going up to what city are they going up to? They're going up to have the ball.
Going to Newport, yeah.
Newport. Okay, so they're going to Newport. That's right. Okay, and
But the strange thing is, we had before we knew that they were going to be writing Newport as an actual location. In season one, we made the decision that the Russell kitchen, which is not a set, that's actually the basement of the Elms. And because we only have a certain amount of stage space, Gladys's bedroom, which is not used as much as the other bedrooms, is on the second floor of the Elms. And then in the second season, when they got a house in Newport, it was the Elms. So I always have to sort of play traffic cop and say, no, 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 you can't look that way because that's part of the Russell Mansion in New York. So it was a little tricky to have one house be part of both their New York home and their Newport home.
is this the Elms Kitchen?
Oh, that's the set that we built for
Oh,
the Brooke Van Ryn house,
oh,
and
okay. So that's
that
not the Russell Kitchen.
no, no. It
Um,
is, however, a kitchen. It's very funny because yesterday, the decorator from season one, Regina Graves, was interviewed for an article about kitchens in film and how they influence kitchens in people's real lives. And she was talking about this kitchen, which is the Brooke Van Ryn kitchen. And then when they released this article, it was a photo of the Russell kitchen at the Elms. So
See,
it's funny.
I had to be very careful when I mentioned it because I knew I would have to be somewhat up on these things. There's some, by the way, those of you who are listening and watching, if you want to get a quick tutorial on imagery, just type in the Gilded Age locations and sets. There's beautiful art all over the internet, and I'm showing some of it for those who can see the room. Like now, this is the Russell entry, I believe.
Yes, yes.
And
And
this
that's
is
actually
this.
that's actually an illustration rather than a photograph.
Oh, okay. Is this one of this was a set you actually built?
It's a set we actually built. It actually has a 30-foot tall ceiling, and it's quite large. When we first started the show, Julian mentioned to me that he was very fond of the Duke Mansion, which is in Manhattan and still stands. But it was much later, and I thought it wasn't really stylistically appropriate, but I made it similar in size. So, but this we have a had a very very talented illustrator named Matthew Sama, who as we were drawing sets, he was saying, "Well, what are you doing with this wall and what are you doing with that wall?" And so he did these pretty photorealistic renderings. They're not like loose sketches. They get confused with the photographs all the time.
Now, I've been trying to keep up with the advancements in AI and digital whatever. I know when some of the the Disney shows were coming on, the Star Wars shows, it was explained to me that when somebody's crossing the desert of Tatooine, they're actually not in a desert, they're on a sound stage, and you could actually create the whole desert on the stage using these video walls. Is that something that you guys took advantage of with your show?
No, that's something very specific that they refer to as a volume stage, which basically is a box that's LED screens, a complete surround, and you need to have all of this the film that you're going to put on there done in advance. So it takes tremendous planning, and it's so sophisticated that if the whole set is brought up, and the camera is pointing to one wall in particular, that wall will automatically go into sharper focus, and the rest of it that's not currently being seen will actually be in less focus because it takes more power to have the whole thing sharp. It's very specifically used for certain kind of things, and this isn't necessarily one of them.
So are you saying that those people still have to trek out to a desert and actually get the original footage?
Someone has to do the. It's the same thing as if you when you used to do like stage work and somebody was driving in a car, the plates had to come from somewhere. Somebody had to drive around and record the road or whatever you wanted to.
Good old rear projection.
Yeah, it's come a long way since the Ricardos went to Hollywood.
You think? Um,
That's a famous early use of rear projection, and it's pretty it's charmingly wonky.
well, I want to put up a few more of the Russell sets. I think these are Russell sets. They're so sumptuous. Um,
Yes, that's the Russell dining room.
that's the Russell Dine. I mean, it's funny
And that again is an illustration, not the
that is,
photo.
oh, 'cause so these are not the actual video. Okay, so this is an illustration, but the set itself looks just
They're
like it.
quite similar. And what's interesting is that I had made the day before they pulled the plug on the NBC version, or the day after rather, I had planned a trip to Newport, not knowing whether we were going to film there or not, and took a lot of photographs. And in this particular rendering, you see the columns that stand off from the wall, and then there are these sconces that attach to the column. And I thought that was a nice detail, and I wanted to use it, having no idea what would lie ahead. And then when we were doing the finale of season one, we lost various locations that we had planned on due to COVID. We were going to have been at Ochre Court, which belongs to Salve Virginia University, but they were needing the ballroom space for social distance classroom because it was big enough that they could have the desks be 6 feet apart. So we lost the location, and we ended up using the the ballroom, the music room at the Breakers in Newport as the ballroom, and it was the same place that I had cribbed this detail of these columns and the sconces from, and it was completely happenstance and a lucky accident. But Julian came up to me and said, "It was very clever the way you tied the things," and it's like, it was a total good luck. I had no idea we would be shooting the ballroom at the Breakers when this was designed.
So when you go to Newport today, and I'll have to go to check out these mansions, the mansions are preserved, but I assume that if you go inside these mansions, it's not the 1880s decor, or is that preserved as well?
It varies per house. The Breakers is the big famous one. It's enormous. It's the biggest one in Newport, and that is fully furnished in the style of the period.
Oh, okay.
Um, and the same thing with the Elms, where we film the Russell house and the part of the Russell New York home. And the ironic thing is they're perfectly furnished with historically accurate furniture and furnishings, and in some cases, original fabrics, so we can't use them. So they're dressed perfectly and they look ideal for the period, but we have to go in and empty out the furniture and put in our own furniture, which is newer that we've reupholstered and whatnot, so that people can sit on them. It would be a bit of a problem having all these drawing room scenes where no one could sit on the sofa.
I assume because the people who own these buildings would not allow you.
Well, I mean, if these historic fabrics are very delicate if they've survived. That comes to be the case in the costume department all the time. They'll see a fabulous period dress for sale and they'll purchase it. Then they'll realize that it's in such delicate condition that they can use the collar and the cuffs and maybe, some other little detail, but they're way too fragile being more than 100 years old.
So when you were doing your set construction for the sets you would have to build on the show, did you have to make the furniture and furnishings from scratch, or did you find them somewhere?
No, our decorator for the first season, Regina Graves, is somebody I work with a lot, and we would find. I mean, for example, in this, we ended up buying new dining room chairs because it's easy to find certain kinds of historical furniture because people really don't want it. I mean, it's some of it is very impressive, but it's a friend of mine's grandmother used to say about certain things. It's very nice, but it's not for people. And no one really wants to watch TV sitting on an 1880s sofa because the back is straight up and as stiff as a board. So you can find a lot of the furniture and it needs to be refinished and whatnot. But finding like a set of 18 dining chairs is a tough assignment. So those were reproductions.
The couches, though, in those days were probably better for your posture because I've discovered lately, having some lower back issues, that if I sink deep into a couch, which obviously means it's very comfortable, not good for the posture.
Right. And it gets harder to get out as you get older. You really sink it. No, it's interesting because the protocol of the time of the right etiquette, if you were sitting in these dining room chairs, is you should be sitting upright and your back should not be touching the back of the chair.
Oh, interesting,
And,
interesting. Now, what
and
did the women do with those, what do they call them, bustles on the back of their posterior?
I believe they sort of like push them to one side a little bit. I mean, Uh, I don't know. I was just listening to a podcast that one of the actresses, Kelly Curran, did, and she was saying that the bustle was fun if you were in a dancing scene because you kind of like swooshed around the dance floor, but they were not. They were always a challenge to sit in. But the posture was so upright that famously, our character of Gladys Russell is really based on Consuelo Vanderbilt, and uh, Bertha Russell is based on Alva Vanderbilt, who was, truly a force to be reckoned with. And she was somebody who came from a not aristocratic family, and she was determined that she was going to barge her way into society, and she did. And she was determined that she was going to marry her daughter Consuelo to a duke, which she did to the Duke of Marlborough. So that whole plot line of the wedding of Gladys and the Duke is based on something real. But not Bertha, Alva Vanderbilt was so determined that her daughter would be perfectly marriageable and perfect leader of society that she had this appliance made that had a strap that went around her neck and another strap that went around her waist and a steel bar in between. So, if she deviated from the correct posture, she would probably choke herself.
Oh my God.
You could spend hours a day, you know, practicing, eating and doing things with this back stiffening device.
Well, being someone who spends most of the summer in shorts and t-shirts with sandals, I I look at these people walking around your sets and I say to myself, I would have never survived there. Life was way too formal. Um, but I want to get to the street because again, the street was just it's I guess to create dimensionality so it stretches on forever, that is using digital technology, I assume.
Yes, and this actually is a set that at the far end of our Russell Street, our 61st Street, we have a small facade, which is the entrance to George's office, which is meant to be downtown on Wall Street or somewhere. And so this is all a combination of composite of buildings that were photographed downtown, and then constructed extensions. So this is what we see when we're leaving George Russell's office. And one thing I learned, I have a great relationship with the visual effects team on the show. First season was Leslie Robson Foster, and then Douglas Purver took over. And we're constantly looking at things and constantly like, if this needs to happen, it's like, what do you think this building would look like? And I'll often pinpoint buildings in Manhattan that still exist, and they'll go lidar scan them, and then assemble them into a backing like this. But it's always more successful if you start with something real, even if you have to age it or enhance it or make little changes. And for close-up work, I still am not convinced with completely rendered buildings, more often than not. It's no different than old films where when they use matte shots, there are some that were very good and very convincing, and there were some that you could see in a second that it was a drawing.
Sure, sure.
And it's the
Uh,
same way with digital. You have some things that are beautifully realized and some things that are less successful.
Now, I think I'm trying to remember if this is the Russell Mansion at night. I
That's the
think
Russell Mansion at night.
yes, that is, and it just shot at night, I assume, for night shooting.
Yeah, we shot that at night. Yes.
Right, right. It's just, and this is your facade. This is not the Elm in Newport.
No, no. Because the Elms, the front of the Elms is meant to be their Newport home.
Is there Newport? Oh, oh, I got it. Not the New York City home.
It's like that in every instance. I mean, we have bits and pieces to make that, and then again, that's not their street. That's George Russell's office
Right,
exterior.
right.
But we end up putting things together from pieces. This is the house when it's first. This is again, it's an illustration, not a photograph. And when they first see the house, it's just being finished, and Bertha goes through to inspect it. Like the general that she is, and she is going around and telling people what passes muster. And someone says, "I've finished gilding the dining room," and she said, "You're finished gilding when I say you're finished gilding."
Yeah, she Carrie Coon is a force of nature in this show, and but she's had some challenges this season, that's for sure.
Well, I couldn't wait to meet her in season one because of that dialogue. Because I said, I'm so excited that you're doing the show and very pleased to meet you. But one thing to be clear, they're finished gilding when I say they're finished gilding, and which she thought was pretty funny.
Now, this greenery behind to the right of the house there, as you point out, is supposed to be Central Park. Where
Yes.
where is this backlot property where you created these constructions?
It's in Long Island. It's on part of a property that's owned by the Museum of Armor.
Oh,
Um, so the only other building in the area has like tanks and things stored in it. And our location manager, who's brilliant, Lori Pitkus, remembered this spot because we were looking for where we were going to build the back lot. And it just so happened that prior to COVID, New York was at the biggest filming boom we've ever had. There were like more television shows and films happening that literally we had to go to Long Island to get a stage space that was big enough for the interior of the Russell House. There was nothing available in the general New York area that was big enough. They were all full. I mean, like the big stage at Kaufman Astoria, the one they always called the big house, um, was full, and all the big stages were full. So we're all over the place. We have sets in Queens, we have sets in Long Island. We film a lot in Troy, New York because it's historically preserved, and we film a lot in Newport. So we're kind of all over the place.
I also wrote down Albany. Do you have any shooting in Albany?
Albany is right near Troy, and it's
Hmm.
very fun. The first season we picked a bunch of things to do in Troy, and the producers were like, "We can't go to Albany," because I don't think they realized it was probably 12 minutes away.
Oh.
And we opened up and started doing more filming there. We
Uh,
also we did some stuff in Schenectady in in season three. Strangely enough, we for scheduling reasons, and this is those typical film things, there were scenes involving Audra McDonald's character and the Black Elite storyline that were to take place in Newport, but the schedule didn't work out for us to have access to that talent during our period in Newport. So we were playing Schenectady as the older historic part of Newport. So, things are seldom what they seem or exactly what they are.
Bob, by the way, my wife and I were commenting, there's a ball going on at the end of the third season being orchestrated by Bertha, but there's a dance hall for just the black characters. Is this a separate ball?
It's a separate ball, yeah. There was a very it's funny, I just met the other night the gentleman whose name escapes me, who was 11th generation in Newport, and he really uh gave a lot of the interesting details about the black elite class in Newport and how long established they were and how they had as many customs and traditions as the later robber baron with their cottages as they called them. But there was definitely a very kind of high-end society there.
It again the design for the ball is just so beautiful. One of the people that I wrote down who helped you initially with your research is a lady named Abby Stewart.
Well, that was I only met her once.
Oh,
We and But this was again when I said I had a trip to Newport planned for the day after. It was the day after we were pulled by NBC, and I went up and she was just assigned to me to show me around Newport, and we kind of geeked out as people who are interested in historic details do and say, look at those hinges, look at all the detail in those hinges, or look at that doorknob. And then we saw her one other time, but it just was in one article that I had worked with her, but it was very, very early on, and it wasn't something that continued through the show.
since Newport has become a major location for you guys, good cooperation from the city fathers and mothers?
Tremendous cooperation. Same thing with Troy, New York. I hate to say it, but it's substantially easier to film in these places. First of all, because in Newport, most of what we're filming is all on Bellevue Avenue. So, you can literally walk from the hotel and go visit sets all day long and never have to use your car. And the Preservation Society of Newport saw an opportunity if this show by some chance were successful that other people didn't. Lori and I were out scouting and we went to a lot of historical properties where they were like, well, we couldn't allow filming here. This is a museum. And they were very reluctant to get involved. And the Preservation Society of Newport saw a beneficial relationship for both parties there from the beginning.
Sure. I did find one green screen shot, which kind of explained a little bit. Actually, let me see if I can find it. Do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do. Let's see.
If I'd known, I could have sent you some stuff. I
Yes,
mean,
there we go. There we go. Now here, I guess this is
strictly
this
strictly second unit filming,
right?
and they're just filming these as elements. So when we are in a place like the exterior of George's office that you showed earlier, and a carriage crosses by, they'll be using something that they filmed on this day.
Right. And here, for those of you who can see, there are big green screen cycloramas that obviously you can insert digital footage into, which is pretty amazing. The other thing I wanted to bring up really quickly is I believe it's first season. Let's see. Okay, so this is, where is this? Excuse me, I'm sorry. Uh, I had an image of the train crash that you did, a rather elaborate train crash. And it seems to have disappeared. Oh, there it is. There's the train wreck. Okay. So, um,
Again, that's another illustration. You seem to have
I guess I've pulled a lot. These are very photorealistic illustrations on the screen. For those of you who can't see, is the wreck of the, I guess those are Pullman cars. Can you talk a little bit of how you achieved this?
Well, we had built a digital asset of a or VFX had built a digital asset of a train car, and then we did an illustration of what it would look like, and then we had a train car in a very early scene where Marion is and Peggy are traveling to New York, and we chopped up that train car and threw bits and pieces of it around, and we had real refuse. But for the most part, the train itself was all digital. Then we had a giant Red Cross tent down on the part of it was this train crash going to affect George's business and the railroad, and they and Bertha had for some reason already met or had a contact with Clara Barton, and they basically turned it into tried to turn it from a calamity that would damage the business into a PR moment of them working with the Red Cross and trying to save people. So it was early PR was the crux of the scene.
Sure, sure. When there is quite a bit of train travel in the show, I assume there are no working trains of that ilk that you could actually get in and off of.
No, we built we had to build George Russell's private train car, which was one of my favorite sets because it's really quite small and it's kind of insanely full of detail.
And where does that train car sit?
Well, it has been in two different places. We originally put it on one stage, and then we had to take it apart, and then we needed it again, and we had to put it back together. Um, but
And
it's still very small.
is it made of actual train car
No,
parts, or is it like a facsimile?
it's all artificial stuff. I mean, but a lot of the detail, the brackets, the corbels, the different curly Q things that you see in plaster on the walls, you can actually purchase a lot of that stuff. And so, I'm sure a lot of it's used on things like wedding mills and catering halls and that sort of thing, or additions to the White House. Um, and anyway, um,
Don't get me started on spending.
yeah. So anyway, a lot of stuff is available. So we built the inside out of wood, and we built just a fraction of the outside. And we actually made the upholstered benches, because those were custom to the train, so we couldn't just find them.
It sounds like you had a pretty ingenious team. Was there anything during the course of the first three seasons that you couldn't quite make?
There were things that were decided were going to require more effort than they were worth story-wise. We had in season one, there was a scene that was supposed to take place on the floor of the stock exchange, and we were looking for locations to do that. And ultimately, our producers decided that it was the point that the scene was making could be achieved with them discussing the stock market in one of the power brokers' offices rather than being on the stock exchange floor. So it wasn't that it couldn't be done; it was that it wasn't deemed important enough to expend the money and the effort. Whereas in season two with the Opera House, that was a very elaborate thing, and it encompassed multiple locations. Because it's funny when we had a scene that was in the Academy of Music in New York, and they had said, well, maybe we could use the Academy of Music in Philadelphia. And this was again in season one. And I went to look at it because they were doing press for the Downton Abbey movie in Philadelphia. So I took the train and I went down to see the Academy of Music. And I said, you can't use it for this Academy of Music scene if you ever intend to follow the Metropolitan Opera storyline, because you're going to need to have this in reserve because it's the only theater in the country that looks like a European opera house. And so we ended up using a music hall that they had in Troy for the Academy of Music, and then we used the Academy of Music in Philadelphia for the eventual Met Opera. But the whole storyline is about having a box at the opera, and they built a new opera house because they needed more boxes, and there aren't boxes at the Academy of Music in Philadelphia. So we built a curved set that was 5 opera boxes that you could sort of slide around, to do the coverage. And as I say, they had to sort of insert them between the first and second balcony of the Academy of Music as if it was a giant cassette because
Now,
had everything had to be measured very accurately, and all the different points needed to line up perfectly. Because in
and you
one
actually filmed that on at the actual houses?
we filmed the audience and certain parts of it at the Academy of Music in Philadelphia. We filmed our opera boxes on stage, the appropriate height on the ground on scaffold off the ground on scaffolding. And then a hallway behind it, which had all of the area of the people coming and going from their boxes. And then we had a tour of the Opera House when it was under construction that we did in the corridors of a movie theater in Albany. And then when they were touring the backstage of the Met, that was also the movie theater in Albany.
Boy, I'll tell you, it is like quite a jigsaw puzzle to do these things. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Let's see. Mrs. Russell is battling Mrs. Astor for the which is going to be the dominant opera house. One is the Metropolitan, which is the Russell version, right?
Well, that again is historically based on the Vanderbilts, and there were only, I forget whether it was 14 or 15 boxes at the Academy of Music. And Mrs. Astor, along with Ward McAllister, were the gatekeepers of society. And Bertha wanted a box at the opera. And in our storyline, when Bertha and George are well ahead and well into the process of building the opera house, Mrs. Astor says, "I've managed to secure you a box at the Academy. So now, of course, you'll abandon this other opera house idea." And Bertha's almost tempted to take the spot at the Academy of Music, and George sort of, says, "You started this, you should finish it," sort of thing. But it's all about, they went to the opera to be seen.
Of course.
Even the protocol that they didn't usually go to the first act.
Now, in terms of priciness for owning a mansion in 1880 Upper East Side, uh, I know numbers are completely different now, but any idea what you would need to purchase a house like the Russells has? I mean, today that cost would cost $65 million. I mean,
In that range, there are occasional articles popping up about a Gilded Age mansion that's for sale, and they seem to be in the, hovering above and below the $50 million mark. At the time, some of them, I think, Marble House, for example, which was Alva Vanderbilt's mansion in Newport, I think that cost $2 million in money of the time period, which was like kind of off the charts. And they would vary between half a million and into a few million. But
I have to ask you about rolling stock. Years ago, I worked with a wrangler on a thriller that was shot out in Wyoming, and we were talking about the old studio system where every studio lot had their own department of horses and carriages and rolling stock because they were doing a lot of westerns in those days. All those departments are long gone. Where did you get all your carriages from? Was it from a specific supplier or?
well, that actually, is the job of the prop department in the ways things are structured in New York. And so there are a couple of wranglers that they worked with, and our prop master Michael Jordner and Peter Gelfman had done the show The Nick, which was set in a hospital in New York in 1900. So they came to the show with contacts already.
Oh, very
Um,
good.
and the first season we had two prop masters because one person had to just deal with the horses and the carriages. And then it's one of those things that you think we'll never be able to do this, and then by the second season it's kind of second nature.
When you're working on the set, when they're actually shooting the show, can you sit back and enjoy the ambience, or are you just constantly looking for mistakes?
Usually I'm looking for mistakes. There are certain moments when everything comes together, and particularly the moments when the whole cast is involved. And it's just a very kind of satisfying feeling. In season one, when we did the illumination of the Times building, the first use of electric light in the city, The entire city of Troy was there. We had taken up the main square, Monument Square, and it was just full of people, and it all came together, and the town was excited about it. And if you looked in one direction, you could see all of our background people, and then right beyond them, you would see a police barricade, and then you would see half of the town of Troy watching. And so that was very it's satisfying when something like that comes together and everybody's involved, and it involved almost all of our main crew and cast, and it was gratifying. But more often than not, I'm looking to see what's wrong, and then hopefully fixing it, and then going on to the next day's work.
Well, unlike a Game of Thrones, where someone left a coffee cup sitting on a table, I assume those we haven't seen any of those kinds of moments.
I don't think so. I mean, but if there is one, someone finds it, and you hear about it pretty quickly.
No, you do. Thanks to the internet. So, has the show been renewed for a fourth season?
Yes, we were told 2 weeks ago, I think, that had a fourth season. Actually, interest in the show has built substantially from season one to season two, and season three is a major increase from season two. And
Well, it's deservedly so. Everybody's delivering their A game plus. And for those of you who have not watched the show, I'll say it again. It's a visual feast. I mean, we haven't even talked about the costumes because obviously that's not your world, Bob. But to outfit dozens and dozens of people in period costumes, and the detail is so off the charts. It's just fun to watch, and I've always enjoyed period films going all the way back to the Ten Commandments. That's, I guess, the ultimate period film.
what you touched upon is interesting because back in the day, the studios like MGM just cranked out, period film after period film, and so they had this infrastructure. They had buildings full of period costumes and things, and it's different now because you do one of these things and you're really kind of starting from scratch for the most part. I mean, they'll hire some costumes usually from places in London and whatnot, but it's not like you're part of a factory like there used to be. Although it's funny because those movies always look a little bit like the time period that they're in. Like if it's in the early 30s, it's supposed to be, Marie Antoinette, but for some reason she has a Marcel wave in her hair.
I think that recently came about. I can't remember what the show was, but they said all of the hairstyles looked a little too modern for the day. I think one of the more recent films that I thought did a really good job of setting the tone for that period would be the Tarantino film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Having grown up in LA and been in LA in 1969, it really he really created quite a fabric. Were you a fan of that movie?
Well, that was the film that won the Oscar. The year we were nominated for The Irishman, so I admired the film. But
Oh, darn. Well, I'm sorry, but anybody who gets nominated for an Oscar is already a winner. Well, this has been very pleasant. By the way, beyond given how much work you have to put into the Gilded Age, are you allowed to do anything in the off season, or are you just preparing for the
it,
new season?
well, this year I've just been mostly doing my own projects because I've reached a point where I've been doing this long enough that I don't want to or need to do everything. I keep saying, I don't need to do Law and Order Camden. And so and it's hard to get something to fit into the time schedule. So, it's some years I've done things, but often I've ended up doing like a lot of commercials because it's easier to manage.
Sure, sure. No bustles. Uh, Well, you have been watching and listening Saturday Night at the Movies. I'm your host, Steve Rubin. Our producer is Ben Shrewsbury. We've had a delightful conversation with Bob Shaw about the Gilded Age and the tremendous amount of work that has gone into the making of this TV series, which will now continue in a fourth season. If you like the show, please give us a thumbs up. We appreciate good comments, or any comments will be instructive. And our other podcast, Tales from Hollywood Land, you can Google it. I co-host that with Arthur Friedman and Julian Schlossberg, and we have lots of fun topics on that show. Thank you for listening and watching today. Thank you, Bob.
You, thanks. It's fun.